Welcome to Grammar Episode 2, Attack of the Clause. So as you can see with this, we are talking about clauses. So we mentioned these a little bit in the last video, but clauses have to have a subject and a verb. And we can have two types of clauses. The first is independent, like Luke Skywalker in the 6th movie, and dependent, like Luke Skywalker in the 4th movie. So let's talk about those types real quick. So an independent clause, just like the independent Luke Skywalker, can stand by itself. It does not need anything else to make it a complete sentence. Now a dependent clause, like dependent little Luke Skywalker here, has to rely on something else to make it a complete sentence. It cannot stand by itself as a complete sentence. So let's look at an example. Luke Skywalker became pretty hardcore. This idea can stand by itself as a sentence. It has a subject, Luke Skywalker, and a verb, became. And so that makes it one clause, and it's independent because that's a complete thought. We could put a period at the end, and that would be completely fine. Now let's look at this clause, after he stopped being whiny. So with this, we still have a subject, he, and a verb, stopped. But the clause itself, taking away the first part, if we just said after he stopped being whiny, that can't be a complete sentence because you're waiting for more, okay, after he stopped being whiny, then what happened. Now we could put these two clauses together and make one sentence. Luke Skywalker became pretty hardcore after he stopped being whiny. And we could put a period at the end and everything would be happy. This still would mean this is an independent clause and this is a dependent clause. It depends on this independent clause to make it a complete sentence. Again, both of these have a subject and a verb. Right here, it has to have a subject and a verb to be a clause, but it still can be a dependent clause with a subject and a verb. So let's move on to talk about types of sentences. And types of sentences has to do with the types of clauses that are in sentences. So first, a simple sentence is just going to be one independent clause, one subject and verb that can stand by itself. A compound sentence is going to be two independent clauses put together. And those are going to be put together with a coordinating conjunction, which we talked about before and we'll talk about again in a minute. Next is a complex sentence. This is going to be one independent and one or more dependent clauses. So you can see that the term complex means it's going to have a dependent clause in it somewhere. Only one independent clause and some other dependent clauses. Then compound complex is exactly what it sounds like. Two independent clauses, there's the compound element, and one or more dependent clauses, the complex element. So those are the four types of sentences we can have, and I'll show you how you can make those right now. So, examples of these types of sentences and how to use commas with them, which is very important. First, here is an awesome picture of the Star Wars characters rocking out. So for this picture, this poster is awesome. There's an example of an independent clause and therefore a simple sentence, because remember, a simple sentence is just one independent clause. Now let's add something else. This poster is awesome and it makes my day. So here we have another independent clause. Now you might say, if I just said, and it makes my day, you're kind of waiting on something else. But the important thing to know here is this and is a coordinating conjunction. Now technically, you can begin a sentence with and or but, and it would still be a complete independent sentence. It's not usually recommended, but you can do that. So this coordinating conjunction still makes this an independent clause and an independent sentence, and so it makes it another simple sentence. So when we join these two, this poster is awesome and it makes my day. When we join them, it makes a compound sentence because it's two independent clauses. Now, remember, when you have a coordinating conjunction joining two independent clauses, you have to put a comma. This is an important distinction to make. You don't always have a comma before a coordinating conjunction, but you do if it's joining two independent clauses. When you have a dependent clause that uses a subordinating conjunction, You do not need that. Let's take a look at that. So let's pretend this is gone, the coordinating conjunction in that clause. And let's just do this sentence. The poster is awesome because I love Star Wars. So if we ended the sentence there, we'd have this independent clause, and then we have the dependent clause because I love Star Wars. Again, we still have a subject and a verb. I is the subject, love is the verb, and we have this subordinating conjunction here. And again, we talked about that in our last video. So because is a conjunction that makes this clause, a subordinate clause and a dependent clause. So notice that with this, if we ended our sentence here, put a period here, we do not need a comma because it's a subordinating conjunction. And this makes a complex sentence because it's one independent clause and one dependent clause. Now, if we throw all three together and make one big long sentence, this poster is awesome because I love Star Wars and it makes my day. We now have a compound complex sentence because we have two independent clauses and one dependent clause. Notice that the comma stays the same in the same way. We don't need a comma here, but we do need a comma because we have our independent clause here, and we have to separate the independent and dependent clause here from our second independent clause. So remember that about clauses, independent and dependent. Remember the types of sentences we can make from those clauses. A simple sentence, a complex sentence, a compound sentence with this independent clause and this independent clause, and a compound complex sentence like this whole thing is. Remember that compound sentences are usually made with coordinating conjunctions, and complex sentences are usually made with subordinating conjunctions.